You are listening and watching the Game Like Training podcast, and in this show we talk about golf practice, golf learning, golf psychology, and all things golf. What we do is bring on, or try to bring on, as many world-renowned professors, psychologists, motor learning experts, and golf coaches that are at the top of their field, and we talk about things, we talk about topics, and we try to bring you, the listener, and the golfers, the best information, but in a practical way. Hey, I'm your host, Matthew Cook.
And I'm your co-host, Iain Highfield. And to get started, I just want to say we love golf and we love helping people. And it's that combined that has driven us to create this podcast. As Matthew said, there's so much good information out there. We believe it's our responsibility to share that with as many people as we can. So on today's show, we have a great coach, a good friend and a mentor of mine, Mr. Stuart Morgan. Stuart, how are you?
I'm good, man. How you doing? Thanks for having me on again.
Thanks for joining us, Stuart. Really appreciate your time and energy with this.
Stu, before we delve into the topic of today's show, which is golf practice and the importance of self-regulation, just tell us a little bit about your job roles right now and what you're doing with yourself and how you're involved in coaching and golf.
So primarily, I do kind of manage the performance for the pro team in Switzerland. This is a kind of a collaboration between the Swiss PGA and the Swiss Federation, the ASG. And kind of got me in to look at all the players and see if I could find any gaps and then kind of help them kind of put some pieces back together to influence performance. So that's really what takes up most of my time, alongside doing some kind of individual coaching as well, reading, creating, the standard stuff.
For myself, in a former life, we worked together. I learned a lot from you. Talk a little bit about, firstly, your develop, train, perform framework for coaching, and then maybe we can talk a little bit about how that helps players self-regulate, and Matthew can share his expertise on motor learning, and then let's see where the show goes from there.
Okay, yeah. So, I mean, really, I kind of created, I called it a performance planner, but ultimately it's just it's a planner which kind of supports coaching and also helps the player understand kind of the process of coaching and kind of what we're going to talk about today. So, the develop, train, perform kind of came about a number of years ago, really, and it's really a process of getting people to understand that there is a journey to transferring things to the performance environment, helping some self-efficacy and changing the environment that they actually practice and train in to kind of, test them and ultimately retain their learning. So really in a development phase is that once they've done kind of initial analysis of kind of what needs to be worked on with, and in the planner there is a golf performance evaluation that the player can do as well. The develop stuff is really about the awareness. So it is a blocked environment in some degree, but it's kind of the right type of blocking in line with kind of research and making sure that there's never a golf ball wasted when they are training. And there are elements of, changing equipment, changing targets and things in that environment as well. Training is really kind of attaching some kind of training or kind of task per se to that to actually help them bridge that way to performance, rather than going straight from that element of working on something straight onto the golf course. The training element helps them, kind of have a smoother transition. Then the perform is, I use a lot of constraints. So learning in the performance element and making the practice environment and the training environment actually harder than what the competitive environment is going to be. I've also added another thing to that, which is restore, but maybe we can kind of come on to that a little bit later when we start talking more about the subject.
Okay, perfect, Stu. So what I would like to do for the listeners is, you know, I understand you're well versed in the research and some of the terms that I've heard you mentioned there. I understand them, but maybe you know, a standard club golfer that's listening in to try and get better at golf. Can you give a specific example of, okay, if they were going to pass through your develop, train, perform, restore model, can you give a specific example of something they would do in develop, something they would do in train, something they would do perform? And if you can, if it's okay, maybe relate it back to experiences or tasks that you've given to players?
Yeah, and you know, like, not just the everyday golfer that's listening in or watching, but some of them up and coming golf coaches, the next generation golf coach that doesn't know this stuff, like you know, like what you were asking there, it's not just for that golfer, it's for those coaches so they can have a good idea and picture of, you know what, that specific example of develop there, I'm going to use with this player. Because I know just from this conversation, I'll start thinking of students that I work with, and I'm like, oh, you know what? I'm going to do exactly what Stuart just said with this student or this student. So, yeah, sorry to interrupt there, but I think some specific examples would be really good for us.
Yeah, so, I mean, I want to say, first of all, that, you know, we tend to make it kind of sound very kind of linear in its kind of process as well, but it's really kind of not. You know, there are some kind of to in and fro in, you know, you kind of move forward a couple of steps and you kind of might move back, but, you know, ultimately for the purpose of understanding it, we will talk in a much more of a linear kind of nature.
That's a great
And point. If we're developing, like, for example, if we need to develop, let's say a short-sided shot, like around the greens. So from some semi-rough or even from the fairway. What I'm going to do, I'm just going to go 5 times 5. So 5 times 5 is the set. 5 is set of golf balls before I need to take a break or kind of do something else. Then do it again and do it again, but maybe from some different positions, just to build the awareness of getting the feelings right, getting some technique right to be able to play that shot at its best and most successful. So there's a bit of a kind of a playing around aspect of that as well. But really it's setting the station up 5 times 5, different locations, maybe take a break or go and hit some putts kind of in between each set of 5 just to break it up. So when they actually come back into the next set of 5 shots, they have to kind of recreate the memory recall to see what was actually being worked on at that particular time. Then in a training environment, we may use the same process of, 5 balls, but we may set them a target of distance around the hole that they need to get. You need to get 2 out of 5 in that target before you move on to the next set. And you need to get 2 out of 5 there, you move on to the next set. So you're adding a little bit more of an outcome to that environment. And then the perform element, perform is just 1 ball. I might even do this on the golf course, but if it's just in a practice environment, I'm not just going to use this shot. I'm actually going to incorporate putting, bunker shots, and maybe have just 1 or 2 of these shots in the setup of 9 holes or 18 holes around the green. But if I was a coach and I was watching my student, I'd be paying particular attention to see if that's retaining and is it going to be able to transfer into the performance environment. If we want to take that performance environment a step further, the real key is, you know, is it happening? Are you able to perform that particular shot under competitive duress? And again, for coaches listening, this is where it's imperative that you actually go and watch your student play if you are developing some kind of skill or some kind of shot through this system.
Awesome, man. That
makes sense?
Yeah, that was a great answer. That you know, if I hadn't have been mentored by you and if I hadn't have read the research, I really feel like that would give me clarity of this process that I need to pass through. Now, Matthew's noted down here, non-linear, tell us more. So we understand that. I understand that it's not a smooth transition from develop, train, perform. So can you give us an example of how it can be non-linear, how you may have to go back stages?
Yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of coaches don't get it.
It's also the speed that you go forward as well. So if I see a player, if I put them in that environment and they go bang, first set of 5, then they're easily playing this shot. Then I look at it and go, okay, let's change this up. And I might just move them forward and say, okay, let's put another outcome to it. And if they start to kind of struggle when I add the outcome, I might bring them back. I might do some coaching in that particular training environment. But if they nail it in the training environment, well, I'm going straight to the performance environment and putting them under a little bit of pressure. And if it doesn't really work there, or they're kind of battling with something, I'm just going to bring them back again. So there's kind of it's like going round and round in a circle, but actually, I try and use it as a spiral where they're kind of spiraling up, and you're always moving forward, always jumping back, always kind of, if your coach is with you, or if the player kind of goes through this process on their own and they figure, do you know what, it's breaking down there, or this isn't working, they might need to get some feedback from their coach. So that's where that whole non-linear nature comes from. It's not just like, okay, I'm going to do it in develop, I'm going to do it in train, and I'm going to do it in perform, and it's going to, happy days, it's going to go into the tournament environment. Unfortunately, we don't work like that.
Human beings don't work like that, do they? Not quite.
No, exactly.
Sheldon
Cooper works like that off the Big Bang Theory.
But I think just as human beings, as a society, you get conditioned to think, if you do this, then this happens. If you do 5 hours of practice and you hit this number of balls, it's the age-old saying that you should get this out of it. And it's not quite as algorithmic as seen, as some people perceive it to be on the surface level. When you get into it, it's messy, just as Trevor Reagan would say. It gets ugly. And so there is elements of what you just said, Stu. You see them perform, you see them do well in this particular area, and you shoot them straight forward and maybe add another outcome, they start struggling. So there's a coaching opportunity, and you just gotta, you're almost getting really intuitive, aren't you, with the knowledge that you have. You're seeing what's unfolding in practice, and then you can start to increase or decrease the variability, adjust the challenge point. You can increase or decrease spacing and all of these other things that we should do as coaches. But I think, hit the nail right on the head. It isn't linear. It's not this do it and happy days. You get good at the end of it.
Stu, to Matthew's point, if there's a player listening or if there's a coach listening and they're starting to grasp this concept, what, in your experience, where do players mainly break down when they come to see you? I have an answer for this question in my mind, but I would like you to, when a player comes to see you and you start to quiz them about how they practice, what is it that you normally see in this pattern that they're not in this process that they're not fulfilling?
In a develop phase, if we do something, they get it quick. Like the players I deal with, like they're able to do it like almost straight away.
Okay.
But the problem is with that is that, if I've done this in the past, right? Where back 15 years ago, I was like, man, that guy's got it. Let's do something else. Let's work on something else. And it's just not the case. So you have to look at that and say, okay, they can do it there, but then can I add more variability? Can I add, the golf course? Can I have more outcomes? Can I add different lies? Can they do it there? Can they adjust and can they adapt? And it's as soon as they kind of get, they get a bit more outcome oriented, and especially into the performance thing, they'll just resort back to old things because they just get so caught up in kind of what they're wanting to achieve rather than actually taking some time to think about how to do it.
Hey everyone, hope you're enjoying the podcast so far. It's that time again. It's game of the week, and today's game is No Look Golf. So a lot of people ask me how we can enhance use of imagery on the golf course. And I believe playing golf without looking at the target is one way that we can do this. Two things this helps us with. It makes us work harder behind the golf ball, getting a clearer picture of what we're trying to do. And as we walk to the ball, if we're not allowed to look back up at the target, it allows us to use our mind's eye to stay engaged or stay connected with the end outcome, the flag or the fairway. So this is how we can practice this. You're going to go to the golf range and you're going to hit one golf ball to a target, but as you start to walk to the ball, you're not allowed to look back up. So you're not allowed to do any of this. Once you've started to walk to the ball, you've got to keep your head down, and then you've got to swing and hit the shot without looking up at the target. If you're successful, you're going to change on your next ball to another target. And then you're going to repeat this process, and at the end, after you've done between 5 to 7 shots, always to a different target, always using a different club, write down how your brain was engaged in the process. That's going to help you learn. And the next step of the game is to transfer what we've discovered on the golf range, how we can engage with the target when we're not allowed to look at it, onto the golf course. So it's basically the same process. Tee your ball up, pick your target, and as you walk to the ball, you're not allowed to look at the target, and you're not allowed to look back up before you swing. Once you've hit your shot, repeat that again, no look, until the ball is in the hole. I want you to play 3 holes, and the goal is to be level with your handicap. So if you're a scratch player, I want you to play 3 holes and be level par for those 3 holes. For handicap players, adjust it accordingly and see if you can connect with the target out on the golf course whilst not being able to look at it through your eyes. And that's where, I love this model because I look and players come to me and I'll talk to them a lot in our first meeting and we'll get on to practice habits. And this is what I see. I see players that live in the develop phase and then go and try and play. I see players that live in the performance phase and then go try and play but never really develop. And I don't really see that many that are in this, that create this training environment. So I think players tend to get stuck in one because it's where they're comfortable or it's their habits. And this model for me really helps players step away, step outside of their comfort zone. Do you agree with that when I say that?
Yeah, I mean, it's ultimately keeping them out of there all the time, right? I mean, it's just, but it's keep it, and this is where, we're looking at challenge point theory. This is why it would be hard to go straight from developed, sometimes straight to perform, because all of a sudden the challenge point may be too great, and it can cause kind of, they might get demotivated and just pissed off with the whole thing. Whereas, if you can take them through like little steps outside the comfort zone a little bit, okay, they're good there, then move them again, all of a sudden, they're going to feel better about themselves. Self-efficacy is going to improve. And then you can start, as you build the relationship with this, all of a sudden their PCDEs are going to improve as well. So you can stretch them even more. And it's that point when they get to there is when you can really make some massive inroads into a player without doing too much with their technique, because they should have the core skills by then anyway.
Awesome. Great answer. So, Stu, it's always one of my goals and one of Matthew's goals to empower the player. And I've seen you do this yourself. So now that we're clear on this develop, train, perform pathway that's in place and it's non-linear, players move to and from each section, how do you enable the player to become their own best coach? How do you get them to understand where they are? How do you get them to self-regulate?
So so in the plan, and like I said, the cool thing about the planner is we have a dry erase pen, right? So you can write on this and then just wipe it clean like each time. But in there, I don't know if you can see that, but we have a golf performance evaluation with all different components, like down here, and some notes that they can write. But ultimately, they just write, it's simple evaluation, 1 out of 10, 10 being where they want to be or the player they want to be, and they evaluate whatever area in there they think is relevant to their game. Now, once they've done that, we also have a PCDE self-evaluation.
Stu, for the listeners, can you just myself and Matthew know what they are. Can you just confirm what that is, please?
PCDE?
Yeah.
So they're psychological characteristics of developing excellence. So really, when we're looking at it, the research that Dave Collins and Annie McNamara have done on this is quite phenomenal, and it's really the stuff that underpins the player transition into the higher level. So motivation, self-determination, perseverance, goal setting, kind of things like this. So if a player is not, wants to play on the European Tour or PGA Tour and they're low on the PCDs, it's going to be a massive challenge, because in there, if they're not self-determined, and we're talking about these players taking this like ownership of what they're doing, then it's just not going to happen. They're just going to want somebody else to do it for them. So once they've kind of done, let's just simply talk about the golf performance one to start with. If we took an area in there that's under 7 and they think, that's really something I need to develop and need to work on, then also in the planner, it has different practice environments that they can kind of learn and read a little bit about. But they can also then write in here, they can plan out their practice session. And, it has, there's a develop phase there, a train phase, a perform phase, and a restore phase. So they can write down a practice session. And one thing I have seen is that sometimes the player is actually scared to do it, because they think, I'm not 100% sure. Do I need, do you want to do it first? But I just say, have a go at it and then get some feedback again from maybe an expert in this or somebody who, really understands this process. Give them some feedback and let them do it again, because that's the only way that they're going to feel and get comfortable doing it themselves.
Awesome. So again, let's take, we've worked with players together, or a tour player. You work with plenty of tour players. We know some tour players, and we know some of their habits. Can you apply this planner? Okay, for example, I've got this player, and this is how they're using the planner at the minute. Again, just for the players and the coaches that are watching in that might want a practical example.
So you would kind of start out there, do the evaluation to start with. Then, you'd have they may consult with me or their coach on actually things that they need to work on, right? Because when you say they need to self-regulate their own training, well, they still need input from their coaches into how to kind of do it. Do they need any technical intervention? Do they need any, any other work on the golf course, any mental work, whatever it might be? So once they have that, they can then just, like I said, just write it down using the information in the planner of how, what are they going to do on this particular day? Some days they might not do develop stuff. They may just go train, perform. And also some days, if they're building up to a tournament, they may use this whole thing to actually increase intensity as they get closer to the tournament, and then just drop it off just a fraction as they get close to the tournament. That's kind of like high level stuff there, periodizing, but that's also in the planner too.
Okay, yeah. So, for me, Stu, part of self-regulation or reflection is, let's say in 2017, I was playing awesome golf. and I've written down, I've logged my practice sessions, I've logged what my thoughts were during tournament play, I've logged my diet, I've logged my exercise. You know, again, we're talking elite players here. I would always encourage any player who wants to get better to self-reflect, but this example would be specific more to elite players. So I have this journal of the mental, the technical, the physical, the practice, everything that I've done. And then in 2018, I'm really struggling to play. So I decide, okay, I'm going to look back at what I was doing this time last year. And we saw Cameron McCormack, when Jordan Spieth was struggling with the putter, what they did was they went back and watched old video. They went back and looked at old notes, looked at old numbers, and he improved from reflecting on, okay, performance of a year ago. If you're erasing with this planner, if you're erasing it, how are you going to keep, like, you can't keep all that in your mind. So how are you going to be able to reflect back, you know, longer term?
Yeah. So, I mean, when it started out, I had a whole page, like a whole year with this planner, and then I printed it out, and it's just like, man, I need 2 rucksacks to kind of carry this around with me. Like I can't be doing with this. So I kind of whittled it down, did this dry erase thing. And the idea was we retain more information when we write it rather than typing it. So when you write something on there, you make sure you take a photo of it, upload it to your Edify space, and you know that you've kind of filed it away for later. If you have those issues, you know, you can go back to it, tag it kind of correctly, and it's easy to find, and you always have it there.
I thought I'd found a loophole in your framework, but you've put that one to bed. I agree. I'm always encouraging students to write, because there's a connection between recalling and writing down, and we don't get that from typing in. But if you can, basically you're taking a photo and you're storing it in the cloud, and you don't need 2 rucksacks to carry all the bags around with you. So
we're actually starting to use technology wisely. Let's not make another $35,000 machine here, people. Let's, you know, take some software and use what we know works for learning, and use it appropriately like that. So that's awesome, man. I like that. That's a really good use of Edify right there.
So, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Nice plug for Edify too, by the way, Spencer. Hey.
So
I'm not sure Spencer may turn around and say, yeah, but that's not why I designed it, and blah, 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 but it's a better use of it. Like, and you can tell him I said that as well.
If you heard that, Spencer, that's Stuart Morgan right there for you.
So let's say Matthew is, and we've seen this. So you have a Facebook group that you invite people to, and you're doing mentorships. You're really trying to put as much information out there to help push the golf world forward. And we've seen this. I've certainly benefited from it on a large scale. Eric, who you know very well, who works with us, he's benefited from your input tremendously. If Matthew was a young coach and he watched this podcast and he wanted to get hold of one of your planners and wanted to learn how to use the planner, what's the process, Stu? How's he gonna do that?
As a young coach, you said?
Yeah, if someone watches this and wants to reach out to you and wants a planner or wants to learn how to use the planner, what systems have you got in place, and what have you got in place to help the future generations of golf coach understand this model and be able to use one of your planners?
Yeah, so I mean, the first thing we have to realize is that I created it with a player in mind. So it's not necessarily, yes, there's some stuff that a coach can learn from it just by reading it. But for me, I always thought that if a coach is going to use it for their students, they need to know, like, what's interleaving, right? I mean, how do you create an interleaving environment, or how do you interleave in between kind of sessions? And it's just little things like that. So there is a kind of as a coach, there is an educational part, and that's done with me. And you can do that via Skype or via FaceTime, wherever you are kind of in the world. And I've been doing that now for the last, couple of weeks since this has been launched. and it's kind of going well. And then once you've kind of been through this, and I'm kind of happy that you can understand how to use it and how to educate your students, then you can order some of the books from me, as and when, however many you want to use. But to use one or to have one, that's great. But really, they're really designed to actually give to your students or kind of sell on to your students.
If no doubt some people have some questions here and there, they might want to follow you on Twitter or Facebook. Where can people find you?
So they can either email me to sjdmorgan@icloud.com. They can get me on Instagram at Stuart M Coaching, and on Twitter. I always have to check this because I've been on this so long I can't even remember my handle. It's the same, so it's at Stuart M Coaching. So Twitter and Instagram are the same.
Cool.
Cameraman Ben's going to get all those to flash up on the screen.
Yeah.
And then probably Matthew, because he's way better with computers than me. Some of those studies that have helped you, and maybe the constraints-led learning guide that you wrote for game-like training, very kindly gave up your time. We'll put some links on this as well, so people can click. So we'll talk after Stu and get those resources. A recommended reading list from Stuart Morgan. Stu, before we close, is there anything else that you want to add about the importance of self-regulation, the planner, your develop, train, perform system?
I just want to again reiterate really that, one, it's designed for the player. Two, it kind of it's always based on, it's kind of a coaching model, but it gives the player that I don't see nowhere near enough kind of good planning and good practicing. And yet when I ask players, rate yourself, how well you practice, it's always a 9 or an 8. And then I start kind of going through some stuff with them about training. And then they kind of go, okay, yeah, I don't know how to do that, or I don't know that, or whatnot, and kind of just rate them kind of selves a little bit lower on that respect. But it's also about kind of coaching, really. And it's about becoming a better you, or an improved you. Every day you kind of go and practice your game. And there's no better way to do that than writing stuff down and being accountable for that stuff that you're kind of writing down in line with your goals. It's easy if you don't write it down, because you can just blag it and just say, I'm not doing that today.
Beautiful.
Love it.
All right, cool. Well, on that note, Stuart, I think we're going to wrap up. But
thank you.
That's incredible. Awesome. I am excited. I think what we talked about, the topic is pretty cool. We got develop, train, and perform model, psychological characteristics of excellence. And Stuart, you can reach out to Stuart in many different ways and grab yourself one of them performance planners. But subscribe to our link on, follow us on subscribe on our website. You can subscribe to us on YouTube. You can find us on all the social links. We're on Instagram. I'm out of coffee. You can find us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Peace out. We'll see you next time.
Thank you. Thanks, Stu.
Cheers, Stuart.
Pleasure.